Monaco does not produce overtaking opportunities, so is now the time to play the final fix chip? Let's find out. What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Thursday, May 23rd. My name is Ewan, and on today's episode, we're going to get into a Monaco Grand Prix preview. It's the second episode of the week after the Imola Grand Prix review that I put out earlier. So go check out that episode if you want to discuss anything that happened in Italy. But we are going to focus on the south coast of France, on Monaco, Charles Leclerc's home race. Can he break the curse? Feeling kind of hopeful, but we will see, as he has had some pitfalls literally at this race in the past. Hopefully you guys are all doing well in your mini leagues, your overall rank. Hopefully Imola went well for you. It was an interesting race, but like I said, there was the episode earlier this week, so go check that out. So let's get into the Monaco Grand Prix preview here with a little kind of course look ahead. Circuit de Monaco, 3.37 kilometers, 78 laps, 19 corners, one DRS zone, and the first Grand Prix here was in 1950. This has turned into pretty much a Saturday race where qualifying is very important. I'm going to get into that later in the episode. However, if you do not have time to listen to the whole episode, watch the whole episode on YouTube or your podcast, wherever you are listening or watching, just check out the timestamps below and just jump around there. And while you're down there, like and subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel. Would greatly appreciate any support. Just went over 400 subscribers, so that is huge. Really appreciate everyone that is subscribing, but I know we can get to 500 before the summer break, so that is the goal. So help me out, help the channel out. Would greatly appreciate that. But yes, Monaco, no overtaking here. There's been a lot of discussion about that in the F1 fantasy community and the F1 community in general over the past couple of years. Monaco just, unfortunately, the cars are quite big now, and the streets of Monaco are not getting any bigger to accommodate those cars. So it is very tough. So traditionally, Saturday qualifying kind of sets the tone for Sunday. I think I mentioned it in the Imola Grand Prix review episode, but in the first season of Drive to Survive, they talk about how Daniel Ricciardo won the 2019 Monaco Grand Prix on like 80% of his engine, and he was just like able to kind of back up the field and still won. So yeah, qualifying is super important here. I was lucky enough to go to Monaco, not the Grand Prix, because yes, not made of money, but I was able to kind of just walk around, and the streets are so small there. That hairpin turn is, I can't imagine an F1 car actually getting through there. Anyone ever trying to overtake there, the cars must have been so small back in the day. Session times for the Monaco Grand Prix this week: practice 1, practice 2 on Friday, practice 3 and qualifying on Saturday, and the Grand Prix on Sunday. For F1 fantasy purposes, our lock time is going to be 4 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. UK time, and 10 a.m. USA Eastern. So make sure that you get all your lineups set before that date or before that time. And then enjoy qualifying, as that is going to be one of the better qualifyings of the year. A lot of people will be going like full tilt just because it is so important for Sunday's race to be in a good qualifying spot. But Friday, because of the 2 practices, we will get the F1 fantasy or F1.com practice debrief that gives us some qualifying sims, some race sims, all that fun stuff. And then F1 fantasy tools should have the simulation out Friday night, Saturday morning kind of thing, just depending on the time zone that they can get that going. And then 11to5 will also have their sims as well. But qualifying, that's the lock this week, just a regular Grand Prix schedule. So 4 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. UK time, and 10 a.m. Eastern. Weather so far this week, it looks like it's going to be dry. Saturday might be the day that we get some rain. Not exactly sure when it's going to happen. It does say in the afternoon, but that could be any time there. So Friday, 21 degrees Celsius is the high with a 3% chance of rain. Saturday is 21 degrees Celsius high as well, but 41% chance of rain. And then Sunday should be a dry race as well. This is Thursday, May 23rd. So the weather could definitely change between now and like tomorrow when the sessions start. But as of right now, it looks like we're going to have a pretty dry weekend. but you never know. So definitely keep your eye on the weather and what that could possibly do to shake up qualifying and even the race on Sunday should that kind of the weather change and Sunday is suddenly the wet day of the weekend. Tire compounds C3, C4, C5 for Monaco this weekend. So the three softest compounds that Pirelli offer. We had that last weekend, and I believe, or no, last weekend we had the C3, C4, C5 as well. But Monaco is traditionally a one-stop race just because you don't need to go super hard on the tires. So it'll be interesting to see what teams kind of set up for this weekend. But yeah, C3, C4, C5 as the tire compounds for the Monaco Grand Prix. Monaco 2023 went a lot like this, like I was talking about. Qualifying is super important for the Monaco Grand Prix. So on Saturday last year, it was Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Pierre Gasly, George Russell, Yuki Tsunoda, and Lando Norris in the top 10 of qualifying. But Charles Leclerc got a grid penalty for impeding, I believe, in Q1. And then Carlos Sainz also spun out at some point during the race in the rain because it was a little bit wet last year. So that actually led to Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso keeping their 1-2 spot. But Esteban Ocon moved up to third. He started third on Sunday and just kept that spot the entire race. Lewis Hamilton, George Russell rounded up the top five. Charles Leclerc finished sixth, Pierre Gasly seventh, Carlos Sainz eighth, Lando Norris ninth, and Oscar Piastri 10th. As my cat goes a little crazy with the excitement of the Monaco Grand Prix qualifying coming up this weekend. But yeah, this just further illustrates how important qualifying is on Saturday. So that's why I'm thinking that the final fix chip could come into play this week in F1 fantasy. F1 Big Data, always a reliable source, always has great information going around. Usually we'll post at the beginning of the week kind of what track this is like, what's similar, what aspects we should be looking into. And he just tweeted this week, I always post which track is more similar to the one in which we will race, but for this weekend, I think it's better to say Monaco is just Monaco. And he is very correct. Yes, there's nothing like Monaco just because the cars are so big, there's so few overtakes. It's can't really compare it to anything else on the F1 calendar. However, they did provide a qualifying simulation and a race pace simulation. So according to their quality simulation, it'll be Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren as the top three, then Mercedes, Red Bull Racing, Visa Cash App there, then Haas, Aston Martin, Alpine, Williams, and Kick Sauber as the kind of the order of the 10 cars. And then he did have a race pace simulation, but I saw in the comments below this tweet that someone was like, why even do race pace? Because qualifying is all that matters on Saturday. And they are pretty much right, as we are about to see here. So how are we going to figure out in F1 fantasy who is going to qualify well? So I went back to 2022 and 2023 and I found the F1.com practice debrief data points. They've called it a bunch of stuff over the years, but this is the 2022 qualifying and their qualifying simulation pace from their Friday notes. So on the Friday they called it the practice debrief data points. Ferrari came out number one in their qualifying sims, then Red Bull, then McLaren, then Mercedes, AlphaTauri, Alpine, Haas, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, and then Williams. So then the qualifying for that year was Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz 1-2. So that went well for their simulation there. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen were 3-4, which was good for them as well, as they had Ferrari, then Red Bull, then McLaren was third, and that's where Lando Norris slotted in. He was fifth in qualifying. Then Mercedes were fourth, so George Russell came in sixth there. Fernando Alonso kind of surprised with his Aston Martin performance, or Alpine performance, sorry. And then Lewis Hamilton in eighth, Sebastian Vettel ninth, as he was in the Aston Martin there, and Esteban Ocon in 10th there for Alpine. So the qualifying simulations in 2022 were pretty spot on, especially for the top five drivers there, top four teams as well. Fernando Alonso snuck ahead of Lewis Hamilton there on Saturday in 2022. So that's definitely something to watch there. And then in 2023, they had Ferrari again as the top qualifying in their simulation pace, followed by Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Alpine, Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and Williams. And It did not come to pass that well last year, but Max Verstappen pipped Fernando Alonso and like one of those epic qualifying graphics. If you see those on X over the weekend, they usually do like the 1-2 and they have the kind of ghost sim. And it was phenomenal what Max had to do on those on that last sector to get pole last year. Alonso pushed him pretty hard, but was not meant to be. So Verstappen qualified first, then Fernando Alonso. Charles Leclerc was third. Esteban Ocon fourth, Carlos Sainz fifth, Lewis Hamilton sixth, Pierre Gasly, George Russell, Yuki Tsunoda, and Lando Norris rounded out the top 10. So Lando didn't really come through with McLaren as they were supposed to be the fourth fastest. He lost out to Alpine. Pierre Gasly coming in seventh, and Esteban Ocon in fourth. So that was a good result for them. But once again, the top three were really close here. So Ferrari, Red Bull, Aston Martin. It did end up with Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, and Charles Leclerc. 1, 2, 3. So we can kind of rely on these sims. So whatever comes out in F1.com's practice debrief on Friday, we should really pay attention to in F1 fantasy to kind of make up our mind where we want to go with our 2 times DRS guy. If Red Bull is storming ahead, it could be the time to just get back into a max lineup, but you never know. So yes, like I said, qualifying is going to be super important here. And why is qualifying so important? Well, because F1 Fantasy HQ, they did a great graphic this week that is on the page right now. Overtakes 2022 versus 2023. This data is from f1fantasytools.com, but the graphic is made by F1 Fantasy HQ. So great job by them. Appreciate them putting that out into the community. As you can see here, they've got all the races from 2022, 2023. Austin in 2022 led the pack with 85 overtakes. Netherlands led the pack in 2023 with 240 because of that wild wet start. But Monaco, all the way down here at the bottom, 13 overtakes in 2022 and 36 overtakes in 2023, which I believe is the most in it's been a while, but it set a new record, maybe for like the 21st century for Monaco. It was 36 overtakes was way too much, but it was wet and there was some kind of other factors. But the main point is that Monaco offers the fewest overtakes on the calendar pretty much every single year. So we should not be banking on, like, say Carlos Sainz goes out in Q1, has a terrible run, just can't get it together. We shouldn't be using our final fix to get Carlos Sainz in because we think he's going to storm through the field. Like, it is just so hard to overtake in Monaco. So that's not what I'm talking about when we get into the final fix discussion. It's more about if you have someone that qualifies high, surprisingly, let's say like an Esteban Ocon. Last year would have been a great year to use him with your final fix chip. I think this time last year is when, or at the Monaco Grand Prix last year, we were all kind of getting fed up of Lance Stroll. He was starting to cost us points in our F1 fantasy team. Really wasn't taking advantage of how good that Aston Martin was. So I believe there were a few managers out there that final fixed Lance Stroll out for Esteban Ocon, and they profited greatly. So that's kind of the thinking for this weekend. I'm not 100% going with a final fix because that will depend on the qualifying results. But as of right now, I am going to be leaving enough money in the bank to kind of use the final fix chip as freely as possible. Like I said here in my tweet earlier this week, early F1 fantasy thoughts for Monaco Grand Prix: Norris to Leclerc and Red Bull to McLaren. This team leaves me with enough money in the bank to final fix Verstappen and for Leclerc after Saturday's qualifying, should things get messy in Charles's home Grand Prix. So this would have me starting with Charles Leclerc, and then depending on the qualifying results, I could use the final fix to bring in Max. That would allow me to keep Leclerc's price rise, and then I would also get Verstappen's Sunday points. So maybe that's a little bit of the best of both worlds. But then later this week, F1 Fantasy Hub had some great points here. He had a pretty good tweet, pretty long tweet, so I'll just read it out here for the podcast side. Final fix at Monaco. There's certainly a case to be made to use it. I did so in 2023. Here's something I've been mulling over today. For argument's sake, let's assume Verstappen qualifies and finishes the race P1, and the driver that qualifies/finishes behind him, i.e. Leclerc, also wins driver of the day. This also assumes no overtakes or position chases. So example A, he has laid out here: Verstappen to Leclerc, Verstappen qualifying bonus plus 10, Leclerc race points plus 18, Leclerc driver of the day plus 10, Verstappen price gain. Total 76 points. since you'd have the 2 times on the DRS and then point 0.2 price gain. So that would, because you would keep Verstappen's price gain from having him in your locked team on Saturday afternoon. The next example he gives is example B, where you would go Leclerc to Verstappen, assuming you leave enough budget, which is what I'm thinking about right now. Leclerc qualifying points +9, Verstappen race points 25. No driver of the day for Verstappen, assuming that he just wins, because he will not win that popularity contest. So that's 0. And then you get the Leclerc price gain. Total 68 points as the 2 times DRS boost, 0.5 price gain. Fascinatingly, the difference is almost negligible. 8 extra points versus 0.3 extra budget. You could also put Norris in place of Leclerc in this example, but the price gain would be smaller. So he laid it out perfectly here, just kind of displaying the logic behind the final fixed chip. And while you can use it, I'm feeling good about using it this week. That's kind of been my initial thoughts most of the week. But like I said, it's all going to depend on qualifying where that goes. But it really, F1 Fantasy Hub did a great job here, just kind of laying out that it may not matter which way you kind of flip it around. So what's more important to you? Do you want points right now, or do you want budget right now? For me personally, I am looking to get as much budget as possible before Austria. There's 3 races to go until the next sprint race in Austria. I think it's going to be really important to be able to get as many top tier assets as you can in your squad for that weekend, because last year a lot of us used the extra DRS boost on the Max Checo build. And while we won't be able to get there this year or yet, I think we're going to try and get as much budget as possible to get as many good drivers in our lineup for that weekend as we can. So for me right now, I feel like the budget is going to be slightly more important. So I'm thinking the Leclerc to Verstappen build, but there is possibilities for other kind of uses of the final fixed chip as we head into the Monaco Grand Prix. So here is my current squad ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix. As you can see here, this is what I had last week in Imola. Lando Norris, K-Mag, Yuki Tsunoda, Joe Guan Yu, Nico Hulkenberg, Red Bull Racing, and Ferrari. So went pretty well for me. As you can see, I snuck into the top 2,000 in the world. I've got 2 transfers this week. And right off the bat, my thoughts are, like I said in my tweet earlier this week, Lando to Leclerc and Red Bull to McLaren, that leaves me 8.4 million in the bank. And this is why this is so important if I'm going to use the final fix chip this weekend. So 8.4 million in the bank. If I want to do Charles to Max on Saturday, I'm going to have 0.6 left in the bank to kind of bring him in and get those Sunday points. If the qualifying results go the way that I think and kind of hope at this point that they are going to go, like I said earlier in the episode, got to check out those qualifying sims. Got to check out the F1.com data from Friday night, Saturday morning. I will make sure to tweet those out on my X account at UNFPL. So make sure you are following me over there as well. So that's kind of the first point. The other thing that I also want to talk about is, say Charles ends up on pole. If Charles ends up on pole, then I'm not going to swap him out for Max. He's probably going to win. I feel a little bit better in Ferrari than I have done the last couple of years with their strategy, how they're doing overall as a team. So I wouldn't be thinking about bringing him in for Charles if Charles ends up on pole. However, 8.4 million in the bank still leaves me with a lot of options. So it could still be an optimal time to use the final fix chip if one of these other back markers comes up big, like say like a Pierre Gasly, or well, the thing is, so right now my highest second asset is Yuki Tsunoda. Say Yuki qualifies 16th. I kind of think he's going to get into Q3, to be honest, just with the way he's driving and how the Visa Cash App car is looking. But say he goes out Q1 and Alonso is in the top 5. I've also got enough money to get to Alonso there, and that would be A-okay with me. Now, obviously, maybe it's not ideal to not have Red Bull going into a weekend. I've saw a couple of teams do that this past week, and it did not go super well. And that is the initial downside to it. Like if Red Bull qualify 1-2, like I could be in a world of hurt come Sunday. But I'm not sure about Checo. We got to see the practice, obviously, but this is kind of the time of year last year where he took his downturn 2 years ago. I mean, he won the whole thing. He won Monaco, so that is something to consider as well. The Street King, but using the final fix chip or just leaving this amount of budget in the bank, no matter what, does give me so much flexibility for that chip and F1 fantasy managers in general. So that means I could go into Sunday with a Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso lineup. Like if McLaren and Ferrari absolutely crush it, it could be a fantastic weekend for this build. Also, you'd get Fernando's Sunday points and you would get Yuki's price rise, which he does usually do quite well in these races, even though he went down point 0.1 last weekend, despite scoring 4 points, but just there wasn't enough DNF. So we will see. However, so there are going to be other people who can do other things. So let's get the team back together here. Let's see. Lando, and then I had Red Bull and Yuki in here as well. So let me know in the comments below what your lineup is looking at like right now, what your thoughts are ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix, and we can just talk it out over the next couple of days before qualifying. So right now I've got Lando. Lando is now a tier A asset, which means he will not rise in budget as much as Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, blah, blah, blah. He cannot go up more than 0.2 every weekend now, as he is above the 25 million point threshold. I explained that in the Imola Grand Prix review episode as well. So go check that out if you just need like a little bit of a further explanation. But pretty much, he is not good for the budget building squads in F1 fantasy anymore. He's good in the point scoring squads, as we can see here, 36, 25, 37 over the last 3 races. So great job by him there. But if you're looking for a budget builder, you will have to drop down below the 25 million mark. So you will be looking at a Charles Leclerc, a Sergio Perez, or a Carlos Sainz. So I think Charles is going to do really well this race. He's the second highest scorer in the game, only trails Max by about 32 points. So that's pretty impressive. And he is just kind of getting it done every weekend. Look at this: 22, 37, 38, 31, 34, 33, 24 points. I said this in the review episode as well, but last week was actually the first week that Lando outscored Charles without the driver of the day bonus that he gets on a weekly basis at this point. So I would say Charles has been a better driver than Lando this year, in F1 fantasy, despite Lando getting the win, just coming on strong. And this is going to be the second weekend of Ferrari's upgrades, so they might understand them a bit more after like a whole weekend of testing in Imola. Charles still did really well last week, kind of like a no frills, no spills kind of race. And I think Monaco, he really wants to win here. I think Ferrari is going to do whatever they can to put him in a position to win and finally get that home win for Charles Leclerc. So that's why I'm feeling so strongly about Charles this weekend. But let me know in the comments below, are you more of a Sergio guy, a Carlos guy? Do you think Oscar can kind of repeat his performance in Imola where he was flying and qualifying, only a impeding penalty kind of dropped him down the grid there? Or you're just going to go with the plain old Max Verstappen? If I want to get Max in my lineup, it's going to be kind of tough. I might need to wild card here. I hadn't even really thought about the Max Verstappen lineup this week so far, but I would have to probably take out K-Mag and Yuki Tsunoda just to fit in the not so great Logan Sargent. I'd have to get Valtteri Bottas and Alexander Albon back in here. I guess I could go up to a Pierre Gasly and run Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, and Nico Hulkenberg. That could be my lineup, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I would be using a wild card to do that. So don't love that either, especially around Monaco. So I think for now, my initial thoughts are going to be get Charles Leclerc in before Saturday, as long as the data kind of matches up with what my thinking is right now. And then depending on the qualifying results, I can activate the final fix chip, whether that's for Charles Leclerc or one of my back markers up to like a Fernando Alonso if Aston Martin kind of figures out what went wrong in Imola and changes their car for the better, and Fernando can kind of have a repeat performance of his 2023 race. One last reminder for the lineup locks for Saturday, May 25th at the Monaco Grand Prix. Local time 4 p.m., UK time 3 p.m., USA Eastern time 10 a.m. So make sure that those lineups are locked. You've checked out all the data. Don't miss that deadline. It's going to be a pretty fun Saturday. I'm expecting a pretty fun qualifying in general, especially after last year where the drivers were all going like full tilt to the max. I mean, Verstappen had to pull it out in the final sector to kind of get over Alonso's phenomenal time at that moment, but he came through. I'm really interested to see this data on Friday. I will be tweeting it about it all weekend at UNFPL, so make sure to follow me there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. 5 stars, thumbs up wherever you are listening on the audio side. Good luck in Monaco this weekend. Leave me any comments below or on Twitter, X at UNFPL, and we can talk about some F1 fantasy before the crown jewel of the calendar comes into play. But once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.